Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming to today's Play Attention webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about ADHD and procrastination. So, my name is Gwen Sorley, and I've been working with individuals with ADHD and weak executive function for over 25 years. And procrastination is a common frustration point for many of the individuals that I work with. So that's why I wanted to talk about it today. If you are considering your own situation and why you came today, type in the chat box. I'd like to do a real quick poll. Who's the biggest procrastinator in your life? Is it you, your partner, your children? Is it are they your students, your clients, all of the above? Let me know who is the biggest procrastinator. A lot of you are saying all of the above or me. A lot of you are saying it's yourself. Some of you are saying your child. Valerie says she is the master. Excellent. Josh says all of the above, especially me and my grandfather. Excellent. So a lot of you are seeing this in yourself and also in many of your family members. You know, you may think to yourself, why? Why do I procrastinate? I know how to do the task. It's not that the task is too difficult. I know, I do want to get it done. And yet it seems that I hit this wall. Or you may look at your child and think, she's so bright. And yet it seems so hard for her to start anything. She just procrastinates all the time. So why do we procrastinate? Because we're all guilty of it. And really, the path to being able to learn how to control our procrastination is understanding the root cause. And the root cause may surprise you. So you can probably all relate to this. You wake up in the morning and there is a specific task you need to get done by 5 o'clock that day. You have the assignment in hand and you know you have to get it done by 5 o'clock. So before you start the task, you're going to go ahead and have a cup of coffee. And while you're drinking your cup of coffee, you suddenly think, I wonder where these coffee beans came from. I wonder where the best coffee beans come from. So you start Googling, where are the best coffee beans? And you find that the Blue Mountains of Jamaica, many people prefer the coffee beans that come from the Blue Mountains of Jamaica. So then you pull up Google Earth and you start looking at the Blue Mountains of Jamaica. And as you're looking at the Blue Mountains, you think, Jamaica looks like a great place to have a vacation. So then you take out your calendar and you start planning your vacation for the next year. Suddenly you look up and instead of having 6 hours to work on that task or that assignment, you have an hour. So now you have no choice but to get started. You know that at this point, you're going to have stress and anxiety. And why did you do that? You started getting sidetracked. You let yourself look up things on Google and you ran out of time. Can any of you relate to that? Raise your hand. Use the raise your hand icon if you can relate to that. Okay, a lot of you are raising your hand that you can definitely relate to that scenario. All of us procrastinate. But 1 in 5 people are classified as chronic procrastinators. This means that procrastination is persistent and even debilitating for them. And maybe some of you can relate to that as well. I found this really interesting, that procrastination is derived from the ancient Greek word akrasia. This means doing something against our better judgment. So even though we know procrastination is not something we should do, it's not good for us, it's against our better judgment, we still do it. If you are a procrastinator then you've probably heard these labels, right? You're labeled as unmotivated or disorganized or having a fear of failing, or that you're lazy. Maybe you even look at your child sometimes and you think, he's just so unmotivated, or he's just lazy. Probably some of us have looked at other people in our lives, or maybe our clients and our students, and we've had those thoughts. But are those characteristics really the root cause of procrastination? Is it really that you are unmotivated or that you're lazy? Or could it be weak executive function? Procrastination is the inability to plan, prioritize, organize, and focus on a single task. And these are all processes of executive function. And we know that about 95% of individuals with ADHD also have weak executive function. So it does seem that the root cause of procrastination is weak executive function. But when we look at it, it's not just about your ability to focus on a single task and to maintain your attention on that task and to manage your time. Research has also shown that procrastination is directly related to emotion regulation. Have you ever thought about that? Have you ever really reflected that maybe it's not about time management? Maybe it's actually about your emotions. If you have weak executive function, you may have wired your brain to procrastinate because you feel that the immediate hassle of starting the task is greater than the reward of finishing it. Think about that one more time. Really listen to those words. If you feel that the immediate hassle of starting a task is greater than the reward of finishing it, then you're going to procrastinate. And you actually can wire your brain to procrastinate, right? Because how do we wire our brain? Well, we wire our brain through our perceptions, our thought patterns, and our actions. And so if you are playing that tape all the time, that you can't do this, that you don't like to do this, and you start playing that tape in your mind over and over and over again, you actually are wiring your brain to procrastinate. The good thing is we know through neuroplasticity that the brain is moldable, it's shapeable. And if we provide ourselves with different perceptions and thought patterns and actions, we can actually rewire the brain so that you can actually take some type of action in order to wire your brain to initiate rather than procrastinate. But that means changing your perception, right? You have to change your perception and focus more on the gratification of completing the task and focus less on the burden of getting through it. Research has shown that procrastination functions as an emotion regulation strategy that provides short-term mood repair. So consider this: when we talk about using procrastination as a function to regulate our emotions and provide ourselves with short-term mood repair, consider your child who seems to always procrastinate when it comes to doing homework, right? Now, your child may know how to do the homework. The homework isn't too difficult. He can absolutely do the homework, but he always procrastinates. Can any of you relate to that? Do you have any children? Raise your hand. Use the raise your hand icon if your child is constantly procrastinating when it comes to homework. Okay, a lot of you are saying that you can relate to, and that can definitely be an area of frustration. So when you consider your child and his avoidance or his procrastination when it comes to doing homework, then it is probably more about his inability to control his emotions and less about his inability to manage his time. It's more about his emotion regulation and less about time management, because he feels that homework is something that's going to make him feel bad, right? It's boring. It's too hard. I'm going to fail. And he's played that tape over and over and over in his mind. Whenever homework comes up, he's playing that tape in his mind, and he's actually wiring his brain to procrastinate. And since there are all these negative emotions surrounding that homework, what is he going to do? He's going to seek out that mood repair. He's going to seek out that instant gratification. And that's when you find your child procrastinating and playing Minecraft or searching YouTube for some YouTube videos that he enjoys. That is the procrastination, that instant gratification, where I've wired my brain. I've thought over and over and over again about all these negative emotions. So again, he feels that starting that task, the hassle of starting that task, is greater than the reward of actually finishing it. You might not have a child, and many of you said that you were the worst procrastinator, not your child. So you might not have a child that you can relate to, but it may be that you yourself procrastinate when it comes to doing work tasks or doing home tasks. It may even go over into your relationships, where you find that you avoid having difficult conversations, or maybe you don't follow through on promises you made because you feel that it's going to be easier to avoid certain conversations or tasks that might be difficult or uncomfortable rather than actually following through. So you end up procrastinating, and that can negatively affect relationships with the most important people in your lives. So let's take a moment and think about, what if we are talking about procrastination and we are talking about how it's related to emotion regulation? What is that task or that assignment in your life where you have those negative emotions and it inevitably leads to procrastination? Think about that for a moment and just type it in your chat box. What comes to mind? What task do you associate it? Have you played that negative tape over and over and over in your mind and you end up procrastinating? Lisa says paperwork. Peggy says dealing with bills and finances. Colin says practicing piano as a child. That's a good one. Karen says spring cleaning. Valerie says housework. Elizabeth has housework, doing dishes. Nancy says cooking. Organizing my house, says Lindsay. Taxes, says Phil. Okay, Phil, I'm with you on that. Taxes, I am a chronic procrastinator when it comes to that. Sandy says cleaning my garage. Sherry says conversations with husband, getting to work. Lourdes says making my own bank account. Excellent. You all have really good examples. Mine, I had to agree with the tax comment, but also mine is laundry, right? For some reason, I have this negative emotion about laundry. And I find, and as I went through developing this webinar, I really thought about that and how I have that playlist in my mind about negative feelings about laundry. So I procrastinate when it comes to laundry. So now what I'm going to do, and I'm going to ask you to do this as well, look at what you typed. What is the one thing in your life that has that negative emotion that causes you to procrastinate? And what we're all going to do is we're going to shift what we're focused on. We're going to focus more on the gratification of finishing that task and less on the process and getting started on that task. So for me, when I look at a half a basket of laundry, I need to say to myself, this will be great. If I do this right now, I'll get that laundry done really quickly, instead of looking at that and thinking, I'll do it later. I don't want to do it. I hate doing laundry. It's going to take too long. I don't want to fold. I don't want to put things away. And as I procrastinate, I then end up with 2 baskets of laundry instead of a half a basket of laundry. So that's my pledge to you. And if you come to all of our webinars, I'll let you know my progress. But I want you to look at what you procrastinate about. What is that negative playlist you have going on where you have that difficulty with emotion regulation that leads to procrastination? And I want you to focus more on the gratification of completing that task and less on the hassle of starting it. Okay, Phil? So I'm going to check in with you and see if you get your taxes done by tomorrow. All right. So if, again, our difficulties that we're having with procrastination, if the root cause is really about how we feel about a particular task or how we feel about our ability to complete that task, then our emotion regulation skills matter. And we need to really take some time to actively work towards changing that mindset and dealing with our emotional response. Research has shown that once the first step is made towards a task, then following through becomes easier. And I hear that all the time, right? I hear all the time that it's not that he can't do the task. And so once I get him started, he has no problem completing it, but it's getting started that is the difficulty, right? So as we're seeing here, what the research shows that if we can get you or your child or your students to take that first step, then following through is easier. So how do we get to that first step? In order to get to that first step, we have to change our mindset. So what I'm proposing to you is that you now focus on developing what's called a growth mindset. A growth mindset will start wiring your brain to initiate rather than procrastinate. So remember, we talked about neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity means that your brain is moldable, it's shapeable, but we have to spark brain change, right? Brain change doesn't just occur. You have to be actively involved in that process because we spark brain change by our perceptions, by our actions, and by our thought patterns. So you have to be actively involved in this process. So this is a great time for you to be actively involved in that process and do that for yourself. But also, if you do have children or students or clients, do this so that you can model the growth mindset for other individuals in your life. So let's talk about the 2 different types of mindsets. And you probably can all relate to these 2 different mindsets. The fixed mindset is full of negative emotions and self-talk. And that fixed mindset, those negative emotions and all of that self-talk that you do will lead to procrastination. However, the growth mindset is full of positive emotions and that can-do attitude. If you start developing and fostering a growth mindset with more positive emotions and that can-do attitude, then that's going to lead you to initiate rather than procrastinate. One of the very first things you can start to become aware of and start changing in your own life or with your child or students is stop saying, I can't do that, and start asking, How can I do that? That's one step to the growth mindset. Stop saying, I can't do that, and start asking, how can I do that? Now, Dan is saying he has no sound. Is anyone else experiencing that? Okay. Okay, great. Thank you for the feedback. I think Dan will have to just go ahead and restart. Okay. All right. So thank you for your response. So that's one step, but you have to be, as I was saying, actively engaged in this process. In order to start changing your mind, you have to be actively engaged in this process. One of the ways, and there's lots of different ways to start developing that growth mindset. And I'm just going to give you an overview of one technique because I don't want to overwhelm you with lots of things you can do. Let's start with one way. One is identifying it, right? The psychologist Dan Siegel calls this strategy, name it to tame it. If you name your emotions and identify your feelings, then it actually gives that less of a charge, right? So that you can deal with it. So it's very important not to bottle that up, not to play it over and over and over in your mind, but actually name your emotions that you're having and identify your feelings towards that task. There are many growth mindset questions that you can use as prompts to help develop that growth mindset. These are just a few. What can you learn from this experience or mistake? What would you do differently next time to make things work better? So there's a whole list. These are question prompts that actually will help develop that growth mindset. And we have a really great ebook that goes along with this webinar, and it has about 15 different growth mindset question prompts that you can use. So in our email follow-up, we'll make certain to include that ebook so that you have a reference point, because it's really important to become active in this process. And if you have a child and maybe your child's younger, and it's a little bit difficult to keep them engaged in this type of conversation, you can use puppets. You could do a mock TV interview, get them engaged in going through these questions. For you yourself, if you're older, if you have an older child, you may just take some time to do some journaling and write responses to these prompt questions. But again, it is really important that you understand you have to be actively involved in order to change that mindset, right? In order to change that wiring in your brain and go from that fixed mindset to the growth mindset. So I put together just a little bit of a model that goes through an example of what I've done with some of my students in the past. And what is in white are questions that I've asked my students. And then what's in the black is their response, an example of their response. But you can kind of get an understanding of how this process goes and how I'm helping them to go from that negative to a more positive, proactive approach. So I start by talking about, what do you think is going to happen during homework time that you can't deal with? So remember, we're getting them to name their emotions and talk about their feelings. I think that the teacher's going to give me an assignment that's too hard. Why do you think that? I heard that fifth grade math is really hard. So what are you afraid of? That the kids will laugh at me if I get the answers wrong. So now you're really getting to the root. And remember, once we can get to the root of their feelings and their emotions, we're going to be able to help them work through that. So why should you try? Or I'm sorry, what should I try? I should try to start doing the math problem first. And if I get stuck or if I have questions, I should ask someone to help me. How do you keep these challenges from standing in your way? I need to simply continue doing my best work and focus on what I can do, and then talk to someone if I need help. So as you go through this process, you're really going to help them name their emotions, understand why they're avoiding or procrastinating, and then giving them some solutions. Now, this is an example for a child, but you can go through this process with yourself as an adult. You can talk through it with a partner. If your partner and you are having difficulty with procrastination, then use some of these types of growth mindset questions in order to have the discussion and work through this. Now, many of you may be thinking, but I've tried this before. I've asked him about his feelings and, or I've asked my daughter about her feelings and she says, I don't know. And of course, that's going to happen. Of course, especially if you're dealing with a teenager, they're going to say, I don't know. Right. But the important part is that you keep going and prompting and modeling it. Sometimes I have difficulty with my work task and it's because of this. And even though you think they're not listening, they are. And so the more you model, the easier it's going to become for them. And they will start incorporating this into their lives. But you also have to make a plan for failure, right? Because failure is going to happen. Even if you have the greatest growth mindset in the world, we're all going to fail at some point. And when failure occurs, then that's where emotion regulation can really become difficult. So we always have to make a plan for failure. And when failure happens, we have an action plan. We're going to allow time for reflection, talk about the effort. The effort was fantastic. We didn't get the end result we wanted, but the effort was great. And then we also have to talk about what did work. What strategies did you use that did work and that you can use again in the future? We also can talk about what didn't work and why it didn't work. And we should probably not try those strategies again because they weren't positive. They didn't help us reach our end goal. So you always have to be prepared that even though you're doing all of these good things to have a positive outcome, failure is going to happen. So be prepared for that and learn how to deal with failure. Josh says, I struggle with this myself, but when my students are doing play attention, they're feeling like they didn't meet their goal. I said to them, did they try their best, their hardest? And when they say yes, I tell them then that they succeeded. I remind them that they only fail with me if they do not try. That's great. So that's exactly what we're talking about here, Josh, that we're not always going to reach our goals, right? We're not always going to get to that ultimate outcome. But you provide there exactly what I was talking about, a plan for failure or a plan for the outcome that wasn't what they wanted. And you're right, play attention gives you an absolute great opportunity to do that, in that you have a structured environment where you can work through certain situations and talk about their feelings and emotions. Very good. Excellent. So again, just to recap, a growth mindset helps you focus on what is within your control, helps you be proactive instead of reactive and disengaged, helps you develop positive feelings towards your ability when faced with a new challenge or task, and also allows you to initiate rather than procrastinate. So I've given you two separate homework assignments for today. One we talked about earlier, and that was to identify that area where you always procrastinate, and then start changing your mindset to the outcome, the satisfaction of getting it done, as opposed to the hassle of starting it. Okay. And see how you do with that. Just start with one thing in your life. And then also start really being active towards developing a growth mindset. Do it for yourself and do it for the people in your lives. Brenda says, is there a source or list of questions to ask myself to get started? Absolutely, Brenda. And as I mentioned earlier, we have an ebook that goes along with this, and it has a series of about 15 different questions, prompt questions that will help you with this process. And again, if you're having a conversation, great. If you're doing it yourself, you should journal, or you could do a recording. That's a great way to do it. So we'll send you that. But also, if you do a search and do a search for growth mindset questions, you'll be able to find lots of different really good ideas. Okay. Now, we've talked about how procrastination is a result of emotion regulation. But all of these skills, all of the processes within executive function, we need to strengthen those in order to avoid procrastination and to follow through on certain tasks until completion. Play attention is specifically designed to teach you or help you develop cognitive skills that right now may be weak for you, but are necessary for strong executive function. So if you have not yet seen Play Attention, there is a series of cognitive exercises, and all of those exercises are activated by your mind alone, or more specifically, your attentive state alone. This body wave armband on the back, there are 3 sensors, and those sensors monitor your brain activity that tells us how attentive you are. And then that information is given over to the computer, where you're allowed to control all of the cognitive exercises just with your mind, or more specifically, your attention alone. And all of the exercises, whether you're working on attention stamina or task completion or auditory processing or working memory, they're all brain enabled, meaning you have to be actively engaged. You have to be paying attention in order to activate the activity. If you're not paying attention, then the activity will stop, or the character will go in the wrong direction, and you have to focus back in order to activate and to continue. The reason we do this is because we know the very first catalyst necessary for brain change is attention. Like I was saying earlier, brain change doesn't just occur. We have to spark brain change. We have to be actively engaged in that process. So that's why we make certain, no matter what cognitive skill you're working on, you are engaged in that process. So when we work with you, we're actually pinpointing the different cognitive skills that are most important for your program. And all of those skills are incorporated in your program with the end goal in mind. And the end goal is to improve these cognitive skills in order to strengthen executive function. So if you think about, let's say, emotion regulation, how are we going to improve emotion regulation? Well, if you have difficulty controlling your emotions, then you have to learn how to pay attention to the entire situation. You have to learn how to process the information. You have to learn how to control your impulsive responses. All of those skills are what you're working on in every single Play Attention session. Your attention, your processing speed, your impulse control. So every time you do a Play Attention session, you're developing the skills you need to improve your emotion regulation. We also work on all of these other cognitive skills that you need to help yourself start and complete tasks in a timely manner. So you may be thinking, I'm not really sure how my executive function stands up to others, right? How is my executive function? So if you are interested in learning more about your personal executive function, we do have the brief assessment available. And if you have not yet done that, because we do have some clients here that are current clients, some clients that have not yet gone through the process. So if you are interested in learning about your executive function, then I would recommend registering for the brief assessment. The BRIEFS is an acronym. It stands for Behavior Rating Intake of Executive Function. It is an online survey. You can do it for yourself. You can do a self-assessment, or if your child is younger, you can do the assessment for your child. If your child is 13 or older, then they can do a self-assessment. And it's a series of questions that will probably take you about 20 minutes, but it gives us a really good overview of your executive function, how you compare to your peers when it comes to your day-to-day life and your ability to follow through, to control your emotions, to be organized. It's really comprehensive. If you do the assessment, we'll need about a 30 to 40-minute block of time afterwards to review those results and talk to you about your personal executive function. But it's not just enough to talk about the results, right? We also want to have a plan of action, because you may already know where your difficulties lie. So we can review that, but then we're going to talk about what cognitive skills can we put into your profile in a play attention training program to help you develop strong executive function and self-regulation. So if you're interested in learning more about the brief or actually registering for the brief, go ahead and type in brief and we will contact you to give you more information on that. Now, typically the brief assessment with the follow-up is $50, but with your webinar special, as always, you'll get 50% off of that brief assessment. So if you do want to do the brief assessment, again, it would be with the special $25. But again, remember, we'll need about a 30 to 40-minute block of time to review those results with you and talk about a plan of action. If you are interested in assessments and why they're important and why we do them, we can send you our recording of our assessment webinar that goes into that. So if you've typed in brief or assessment, we'll make certain to get you that webinar recording as well, so that you can really get a better understanding of the assessments we provide and the importance, what we do with that information to help you develop a plan of action. So again, once we go through the brief, and we can talk about how play attention can help you improve executive function by actually incorporating certain course modules into your plan to make certain that you are aware of the areas, the cognitive skills that we can improve, and how that will lead to strong executive function, which again means improved emotion regulation, which means less procrastination, which of course is our topic for today. So if you want more information, again, go ahead and type the assessment, or if you would like to do a consultation, you don't really feel you need the assessment, you just want to learn more about play attention and how we can develop a specific executive function training plan for you, type in consultation, and we'll reach out to you to schedule that one-on-one consultation. Now, while I go through these next steps, please do type in your questions. I see that a lot of you have been typing in questions, and just know that I am going to go back to those questions and make certain that I've addressed all of those questions. So do please keep them coming. So if you want just a consultation, you don't necessarily need the assessment, then just type in consultation and we'll contact you. The consultations usually take about 45 minutes. And that's when we get to know a little bit more about you or your child or your partner or your students, your clients. And we talk about their strengths, their weaknesses, and how we can customize a plan to address their specific needs in order to help them improve executive function. If you want the assessment and the consult, then type in assessment and we'll reach out to you for more information, or type in brief, either one, and we'll make certain to reach out to you about that. And like I said, if you type in brief or assessment, we'll make certain you get the webinar recording as well that talks about the brief assessment, the focus assessment, why we assess, and what we do with that information to give you a plan of action. If you are here and you are a current play attention professional, that means you have the play attention professional system, you may want to register for next week's webinar, which is going to be a fantastic webinar. We're going to talk about how to really use this spring season to grow your play attention community. So if you are a current play attention professional, that means you have the play attention professional system in your clinic or your school or your learning center, then go ahead and type in webinar and we'll make certain you're registered for next week's webinar that is specifically for current play attention professionals. Or if you're a play attention home client and you want to upgrade to the professional, come as well, because it's going to be a great webinar. Also, be certain, and I know many of you follow us and you are always at our webinars, so make certain you go to our website and check out our spring webinar series. It's a 5-part series, and we're going to talk about how to cultivate transformation and personal growth. So we're going to be talking about executive function. We're going to be talking about time management. We're going to be discussing behavior shaping techniques. It's going to be a fantastic webinar series. So please do watch your emails for that, or check out our website to keep up to date on that. So again, before I exit off of here, I'm going to go back to all of these questions and make certain your questions are answered. If you do have to leave now, I really appreciate your time. I appreciate your attention. I hope that this webinar gave you a new perspective about procrastination and gave you positive steps that you can take today to help you control your emotions and avoid procrastination and start initiating. Thank you so much, everyone. It's been a pleasure speaking with you today. I really appreciate your time and attention. Take care.